is that we're having a reflection on 10 years of agility. So exactly, or almost exactly 1 year ago, a group of 40 of us, oops, what happened? There, a group of 40 of us got together at Snowbird on February 12th, 2011 to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the signing and the authoring of the manifesto for Agile software development. So let me go back up here. So as we're well aware, the Agile movement got kicked off via this manifesto and in 2001. And it's the Agile movement has progressively grown to the point where now Agile is a very mainstream software development approach, and it's picking up more steam, and everyone wants to be Agile. Not everyone has become 100% Agile at this point, but what I think is very strong about the Agile Manifesto is it's been 10 years and it's held up very well through time. The core issues, the core values that we represent are still pretty accurate as the core values, and these values do drive what makes software development work well. As part of this 40 people, it was organized by Alistair Coburn. Alistair was was the person who actually was the organizer of the first meeting of the 17 authors. And we were fortunate to have 5 of the original authors in the audience, Mike Beadle, James Grenning, John Kerr, and Jeff Sutherland, in addition to Alistair. And so it was a group that Alistair organized. We met again at the lodge at Snowbird. And anytime you do a retrospective, your retrospective is dependent on essentially 2 things. First, the group that's doing the retrospecting, and then the mirror that you're looking at. So this was the group. It was a fun group. We met for 2 days. First to celebrate the manifesto and the 10-year anniversary, then to do some reflection on where the industry was at and what some of the things might do, and then also to look forward at what things we could do to really take agility to the next level. So as we were going through our exercises in the morning, we were doing a bit of a World Cafe, and in the World Cafe we were wandering around to different topic areas that we had identified. And then at the end of the world, these are things like, what are some of the problems we're encountering? The problems were identified in different areas, and one of the ones that we ended up with, and my group ended up at, was some of the key learnings associated with the future. And this was our opportunities, or where do we want to go, where do we think it's going in the future. And so Rachel Davis and I were there holding up or I guess I'm holding up the flip chart, and Rachel's going through the different items that we talked about related to the future, and this is just a sense of where we thought things were going to be going. And when we got done with it, we had a comment from David Anderson, and David Anderson had, I think, had put something up on one of the flip charts that was related to a topic that was of interest to him, and as we were going through it, we really didn't quite we didn't know how to put it in our summary as we were going through, and that's always the case as you're going through and summarizing things. You have to make judgment calls, and so David wanted to call out a particular thing. Well, there's an elephant in the room, and we said, oh really, what's that elephant? And so the elephant that he brought out was the Agile Alliance, and the Agile Alliance in this role in leading the community, its role in taking agility and providing overall community leadership. And it was interesting because both Rachel and I had spent a lot of time together. Both of us had been on the Agile Alliance board for 6-7 years. And so we thought, well, that's interesting. We didn't think of it in that terms. We thought there's a particular role of the Agile Alliance, and yes, are they performing that role or not, but is that a major participation in the direction of agility? And then we had a good, healthy debate among the people, and it was sort of interesting to see how the community responded. There were quite a few people who said, well, there's the Agile Alliance is there, it's doing whatever it's doing, but I don't see them as a particular needed element to make agility move forward. Its role is actually serving well as someone that holds the annual conference, and that annual conference, I was involved, as Hemant indicated, in co-organizing that conference with Alistair Coburn, the first one that we held, the Agile Development Conference in 2003 in Salt Lake City. We had 200 people, just over 200 people, and at last year's 10th year anniversary, we had over 1,600 people. So obviously that conference is doing well, and is a the premier conference in the Agile space. There's a lot of conferences to go to. That conference is a particularly special one that pulls together the overall community and does quite well with it. It's by far the largest thing that the Agile Alliance is involved in, but the Agile Alliance has had other outreach and different things. I think where we realized as part of this activity was that there was different views of what community leadership might look like. And we look back to another manifesto, the Communist Manifesto. We have sort of one view of leadership being the three-headed group of Lenin, Marx, and Engels, and the personification and the strength around pulling a leadership model and a strong top-centered organization, a bit more top-centered organization, as opposed to the form of the revolution showing the proletariat coming together as a broad community with the strong arm. And I believe that the Agile Alliance board, having been on the Agile Alliance, views the role being quite different. It's not viewing their role as being a policer of the Agile space. Which is very different from a lot of other organizations. I think they view themselves as more of a facilitator and holder of the space, and a place where they do the things to remove barriers so that the Agile community can continue to grow. And so I think the big challenge here from an elephant perspective is some people want it to look a certain way, and other people want it to look a different way. There's a lot of debate as to whether it was really an elephant, but I think it was really just the trigger that got something else going later on in the afternoon. The way the structure of the meeting was held was that the morning was this retrospective, and then in the afternoon it was free time. Some people went off to go skiing, a few people had some other meetings to run off to, and then there was a few of us who weren't really quite sure what we were going to do with our time, and we were just sitting around having a bit of a conversation, and all of a sudden we said, well, so the Agile Alliance elephant is one of those things. What are some of those other elephants that might be out there? What are the other unmentionables or challenges that the Agile community and the Agile adoption faces? And what are some of those that we need to would be valuable to explore and put out a little bit more discussion around? So we said this is a great opportunity. There was about 15 of us left. So this group of 15 decided that we were going to go hunt elephants and just go look around, have a nice discussion, have a round table, and see what we might find. So this is the group of elephant hunters that I remember. Fortunately, we had Mike Hugos there taking a couple of videos, and he posted a couple of postings on CIO magazine. So there's some articles around this, and actually a couple of videos that he had taken as well. If you look at the left-hand picture, that is Philippe Cruchen, who was recording and took a lot of, ended up writing a really nice blog posting on the elephants in the room. Jennifer Weeks, David Anderson, and Kay Johansson. In the upper right, we have Eric Huddleston, Jeff Patton, and Andrew Schaefer. And then in the bottom right, we loop back on Kay again on the left, and then myself, Russ Rufer, and Ryan Martins. And then not pictured because the video didn't go all the way around, we have Tracy Balick, Mike Hugos, who was taking the pictures, John Johansson, Nate Jones, and Janice Linden Reed, who were the people that I remember being overall participants in the elephant hunting. And if we take a look back, we can see us working hard, trying to figure out whether there's any elephants to be found. And this is, as a good Agilist, we were there making lots of sticky notes, making lots of notes, and writing things down as we got them going. Here's just a little bit of the work that we captured. I'm going to go through some of them in the order that I think or in no particular order, just trying to put together something that weaves together a few stories. So one of the big ones, I think, was all of us sort of came together with the issue of pretending that agility is not a business. There are commercial interests that are out there. Agility is a life. Oops. Agility is a very important business for a lot of commercial interests, and what we see happening as a result of that is money gets in the way, and some of the important principles are not necessarily always preserved. First thing we see is some commercial interests are censoring failures. We have examples where some of the panelists or group was saying that they were making references to particular agile implementations, agile adoptions, where there were some major challenges and even could be considered failure. And some of the people that were involved in that adoption were very very aggressive in trying to persuade the to not be repeating that story because it was impacting their business and they were worried about that. So the reality is that there is a lot of business interests out there, tools vendors, consultants, and they're all making their business on the growth of agile space. And as a result, there are some distortions of what can actually happen. There was a view that there's a failure to dampen some of these negative behaviors, a realization that dogma sells, that it's much easier to give a prescription than it is to actually help people through their real problems and help them work through the context that's necessary. And of course, there's a bit of hypocrisy as well. People who are out there selling, anytime you're in a sales mode, you're actually going to be selling something, and you're going to sell what you have, not necessarily what works. So there's a acknowledgement that our community is not pure. We strive to be purer and purer, but the reality is that there are these financial interests at stake, and that will happen in that mode. A big element of this, I think, is the I keep coming back to the first line of the manifestos: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And what we actually see out there, we see large emphasis on Agile as a process and Agile tools coming out. This is okay. Agile is a form of a process. If somebody refers to agility as a process, it gives me a little bit of a concern, because I wonder, have they just jumped on the process mechanics, or have they actually gotten it at its core? Are they functioning from the values in a mindset of an Agile way, or are they just focusing on the mechanics? Are they just focused on the piece that they can, such as real focus on burn down charts as a mechanism, real focus on, am I doing all the specific mechanics and practices, or am I actually giving the core and the principles of Agile development? And likewise, we have a lot of tool vendors jumping in. They've got tools, they've got to sell it. It's a lot harder for them to sell individuals and interactions than it is for them to sell into their process and tools. So these behaviors are reality, right? We want to, when I'm coaching teams, I always try to get them to come back to the values of the manifesto, come back to individuals and interactions, come back to, yes, we view processes and tools as important to support that, but let's make sure that why we're utilizing those, why we're doing it, and are they fostering the environment, are they fostering the individual interactions, and are we constantly inspecting and adapting to improve things? One of the things that happens in the community is that we have a lot of anarchists, people that, let's face it, a lot of people got into agility in the early days because it was something different. It was a way to do things different. It looked like it was a way to subvert the current environment, to actually take power back into the technical people, to the development community. I think the fact that extreme programming was so popular, just the concept of extreme programming really brought out, I want to be extreme. I want to be doing something different. And that anarchism has been helpful in terms of creating a groundswell of people that want to do things differently, but it also creates a difficulty of bringing the community together in a form that we can agree on how to move forward. So a minor elephant, but one that's still important in looking at the overall Agile community. I think related to this is the other part that certainly from the early days who had the concept that all managers were bad. And the reality here is that there's a lot of bad managers, right? There are bad managers. There are people that don't get it and are operating out of the wrong value principles. On the other hand, there's an awful lot of great leaders. And the great leaders are the ones that pull together great teams. And leadership is really critical for getting progress and getting understanding of purpose and why. And so I think the challenge that we've had is all of these mindsets coming together do create some challenges. In the early days of the conference, of the Agile conferences, the first, I've witnessed a trend. The beginning was almost entirely developer-led. Developers who wanted to take charge of the destiny, they got together and they said, oh, if people would just leave us alone, we could get so much done. And eventually, we saw fairly quickly that the developers said, and you know what, we don't really need testers either because they don't know what we're doing. So developers should really be running the shop. In the first couple of conferences, the first couple of years of the Agile movement, I think the testers started to get together and said, no, we actually understand this stuff too, and we can be helpful. And as a result, I think the testing community got pulled in pretty quick because of the relationship. So the testers, there were enough testers that got on the side of testers and developers that got together and said, you know what, together we can do better. So that worked out fairly well. Then eventually, that went on, and they said, well, we don't really need any of the project managers and managers. They're just in the way. We don't need them. We have our own things. And then I think we found that no, actually, that community is important because if they're not aligned with us, they can get in our way. Similar thing happened with business analysts. Early stages, business analysts were not part of the organization, but they started to get involved. And over time, we started to pull back and bring a much larger, broader community, which I think is really critical. And I think there's still a large way to go in pulling around the business side to really make agility foster well. Business side and leadership issues are really not all addressed well within the Agile community, and there still are challenges, a bit of an elephant in the room. Another one that is, again, related here is self-organization. The answer was, well, if we just self-organize, look at how effective the birds and the bees are at self-organizing, and we could do something similar to that, and our teams would be far more effective. And I've seen some teams that are self-organized that are extremely powerful and can get things done really well, are focused, know what they're doing. They do need guidance. They need guidance in order to be able to be effective, but they only need light touch. And I think it's that finding that light touch that makes teams that is the challenge. Finding the amount of light touch and the amount of right direction that can be brought together to make a self-organization team work. I think the elephant here is that the answer is so often, well, you just need to allow them to self-organize. But the elephant is that we don't have a great answer for how to self-organize. We just say, go do it. And I think there's some big challenges here. There's some challenges on the leadership and management side. There's some challenges on team skills that what will it take to actually be effective self-organizers. And with regard to collaboration, I think it's great that the Agile movement has brought forth how important collaboration is and how important collaboration can be. The danger here is that we can get into a mode where we think that collaboration is the only answer. Everything that we do has to reach consensus. Everything that we do has to be done with everyone on board. And that can be a bit of a challenge because sometimes the best answer is for people to go off on their own and explore something independently, because if they're all forced into a group, they don't have the ability to go off and explore things that are really breakthrough items. We end up in a mode where too often we get groupthink, where everyone agrees to something and it's a sub-ideal situation because we haven't allowed ourselves to look far enough, because anytime somebody does lift far enough, the group swats them down and says, hey, come back in. There's been a lot of publicity on this book, Quiet, by Susan Cain, on the importance of introversion and the need for people to be able to have quiet time and ability to go off on their own, and that, in fact, a huge number of major breakthroughs in the world have come from people who were largely independent thinkers, such as Newton. And I come from the view that both sides are really critical. I mean, I've been involved in collaboration, which I thought was fantastic collaboration. I also feel a lot of times where I have to have that time to go off and work independently and get away from some of the prevailing ideas in order to come up with something that's breaks away from the existing situation. So I think of it as a bit of a yin and yang, where yes, collaboration is great, but we don't want to get into a mode where we feel like everything has to be collaborated. Every time there's something up, we don't have to call a meeting of everyone to make sure that everyone's on the same table. We need to come off and let people do some things independently and make sure that there's structures in place to bring some of those ideas back in. So I think it's a challenge. It's great, but a lot of times we brought a lot of people from the facilitation community into the Agile world. They were one of the early people to jump into our space because they said, here, finally somebody who gets how teams need to work and how great collaboration can be. And yes, collaboration is great, but what we don't want to be a situation where we're forcing collaboration. An example here was just at this meeting itself. When we went on, we had the structure so that the group of us did this elephant hunting. When we came back in the evening, the facilitators had another planned activity. And they started doing some inch work for a little while, but we had so much energy from the discussion that we had kicked off with the elephant hunt that a group of us said, you know what, we would rather continue that elephant hunting exercise and go into a little bit more depth on some of these elephants and see if there's things we could do on those, rather than participating in this group activity. And it frustrated the facilitators to no end because we were off on one end of the room while the other group was at the other end. I think in the end it was great because both groups got some really good work done. And while the facilitators were frustrated, we were a bit obstinate, and maybe we those anarchists that were out there that were trying to do our own thing. But I think we really felt like we got a lot out of what we were there for, which was continuing a great discussion and coming up with some deeper thoughts and deeper ideas that we could explore further. So this is a cartoon that I put together back in the early days of extreme programming. I was comparing with the whole concept of extroversion and introversion, and one of the challenges in dealing with the software industry is we have a lot of introverts in the software industry, and the pair programming was one of the big things about extreme programming. It still is, and a lot of people are very effective and have found pair programming to be an extremely effective approach. When we first started it, it was very challenging to a lot of people. They didn't really feel like they wanted to be in a mode that they were pair programming with someone at all times. They felt like they needed some of their private time. And I think the way I've taken a look at this is pair programming is just one of those tools in the toolkit, and some people will be really great at it and it will work really well. In other places it may not be the right answer. And here the picture from amongst the screen is the idea that we'd have two introverted programmers coming up together and realizing that they only had one keyboard to work with. And you can tell it was an old one, I put this together very old because I had a CRT screen rather than a flat panel. So this is, I think, circa 2000, 2001. Then move on a little bit. We go into one of the other elephants that we came up with was elitism as a failure, as an excuse for failure. So the idea that, well, you failed, your team failed, your Agile adoption failed because you didn't have the right people on it. If you would have had really good people, then your adoption, you would have had great Agile projects. And that is just not an acceptable excuse, because the reality is if I have really good people on any project, it probably really doesn't matter what approach I use. I could use anything, and if I had great people, those great people are likely going to have fairly good results. Agile really has to get to the point where it works as a mainstream approach, and that sure we're always going to have people problems, but the checks and balances in the overall approach need to be such that it works across all development cycles, development teams, and that we're not requiring that we have superstars on teams. So too often we see this as to say, well, you just didn't have the right people, and that's not good enough. Yes, obviously you want the best people possible, and but you also want to use the people that you've got. So we see this as a bit of an elephant here. Distributed teams are a reality. In the early days, we said, well, all you need to do is get the right people in one room and give them a task, give them a challenge, and those people will figure out how to get it done, and they'll do it, and just leave them alone. The realities of the modern global workforce is that people are distributed throughout the world. Outsourcing is a reality in many companies, and we have to figure out how better to manage distributed teams, how better to handle scaling. Some of the simple concepts of scaling, such as Scrum of Scrums, is a good start. It's not necessarily a complete solution. I think we find that people do have challenges with figuring out how to scale up beyond a few teams. There's still, there are challenges with that in a traditional environment as well. But those challenges have not been addressed well, and I think the distributed nature, some teams are having some good luck, good success with having remote teams and distributed teams, and it's getting to be much more of a conversation within the Agile community. We still seem to see people out there saying, well, don't even try it, it's not going to work, and but it's just not working with the corporate reality. This is one that's sort of pervasive in that it gets back a little bit to the idea of the financial interest, is that context gets in the way of dogma. It's much easier to sell dogma. It's much easier to say, I've got your answer. It's much easier to say, just do it by the book, and you'll get exactly what you want. And I think that goes over well in many cases, because we see that businesses are saying, I'm not getting the results I want, so if you give me a recipe for success, I'll be so happy. And the reality is those recipes need to be tailored based on the individual business's needs, and it's much more of a journey than it is a direct transition that can be done overnight. So the only way to get that to get on that journey is by actually inspecting and adapting, looking inside, rather than coming in with a package deal and a formula that says do it this way and we'll have great results. So moving on here, what we're finding is cultural issues are huge, and there's been a lot of discussion recently around some of the challenges in culture, especially as agility is moving far more globally, moving into areas that have a very strong affinity for some of the agile concepts, like Scandinavia, where collaboration is a very strong, and the whole dealing with teams is a major issue. They're taking up agility very rapidly. Other places, such as China, have had it's starting to work, but it's had different challenges. So we have a couple issues there. But when you have inside the organizational culture issues, we start to bring in politics. And politics are a major driver of internal culture. And I don't think that we've done a very good job at all within the Agile community of really trying to understand organizational cultures and organizational politics. And so I think I don't have the great answers here, other than to recognize that they exist and that they're always going to be influencing some of the challenges that we have with adoption issues. One of the things that faces a challenge within organizations is that many people would rather be wrong than uncertain. They'd rather say, just give me an answer rather than give me than tell me you'll give me the answer when you know it. So this is down in the lower right's a sign from Uncertain, Texas, where the population is only 150. So only 150 people in Texas are comfortable being in the uncertain space. But it's a challenge. I mean, I think a lot of the early Agilists live in uncertainty and say uncertainty is the reality. And I see this as a major mindset challenge with dealing with people that are just not comfortable working with uncertainty. And we haven't done a good job. We don't have a good answer for how to make people more comfortable with uncertainty, because uncertainty is reality in our industry, both from a market perspective and from a software development perspective. So we have uncertainty in a lot of areas, and we have had difficulty in trying to get people to comprehend the amount of uncertainty, to comprehend that uncertainty is a challenge, and also to figure out ways to bound that uncertainty better. This is related, I guess, to the question that perception really trumps reality. In an organization operational mode, we always say that perception is reality. I'd say perception trumps reality. Reality may be there, but what we see is actually, how we view it is what actually causing us to make our decisions. And if we've got a perception that, if I go to two people and one person says, well, this will take somewhere between 1 month and 4 months, and somebody else says, well, it'll take 1 month, I'd rather have the person that says 1 month. That's the perception. I'd rather have the definitive answer and the short answer, whether they're right or wrong. So we have to start moving in a mode where one of the things that I love about Agility is that we really focus on transparency. And that transparency is what helps us try to bring reality and perception more in line. And I think we need to continue to work that and continue to work it better. Moving on this whole question of culture, I think that Agile needs to adopt to culture as much or more than culture needs to adopt to Agility. I mean, our core answer out of the box is, well, if you don't have the right culture, you won't be able to be Agile. And I believe that that's true. You do need to have some, there are certain things that need to happen culturally or movements towards a more Agile-friendly culture in order to be successful with Agile transformations. But I think we need to find ways to actually tailor our Agile approaches and some of our practices so that they will adopt more to culture and understand that there are challenges that are difficult to get around, they're organizationally difficult to get around, and if we can inspect and adapt our approaches to that better, we can fit in more appropriately. Okay, now we start getting into the element of the business side of things, and two of the key things that come from Agile is we talk about the voice of the customer. And I don't know, I've never had, on any project I've ever been on, I've never had one customer. I think the only time I've ever had one customer, it was probably when I did something for myself. And even then, I probably had diverse opinions about what I really wanted to have done.
I thought before you move on to this topic, can we take one question on the previous one?
Okay, sure.
So the question is, can you give an example or two of, in real world, of meaningfully adopting Agile to a culture?
Of adopting Agile to a culture?
Yeah.
Okay, I think you could talk about how, I think some of this is where we see different businesses relate. I think we're starting to see, for example, we're starting to see Agile get picked up in government quite a bit. The government was one of the real drivers towards things like CMMI, where it was trying to create a structured environment, because their culture was one where they didn't want to have any, they wanted to have everything under control. They wanted to have everything lined up in advance so that there was no ability to blame anyone. If there was blame, the blame would be identified through the documentation. And I think what the government is starting to figure out is that we can take, they're trying to start moving directly, much more towards Agile, yet they have degrees of compliance that they work into it to try to figure out how to, cover those key issues. And so they're adopting their own culture because they had a very bureaucratic one that needed to be fixed, and they realized it wasn't working. They're also making some builds on Agile to try to blend into that.
Okay, great, great, thanks.
So the next one here, the voice of the customer. The reality is there's large numbers of customers, and there will always be some diverse voices. People, one person wants red, one person wants green, one person wants pink. We have to figure out what's really going to drive the value equation, and that requires a challenge. One of the elephants that did come up in our discussion was that we put all of that responsibility. We absolve ourselves from responsibility by putting that all on the product owner. And the reality is that that's a bit more ownership. We need to pull some of that ownership. There's a lot more people that have some influence on that, but we've put a lot of responsibility on the product owner, the product manager, whatever the role may be. They have that challenge of figuring out not so much where to go, but what not to do. And that's always what I would, looking at product managers and good product managers, the biggest sign is not that they know what to do. It's often that they know what not to do, because we maximize our value often by what we don't do. Related to here is also the question of the elusive business value. We say we rank order everything by business value. Our community has done a good job of identifying the importance of identifying value, and that value is far more important than technical, than something specifically technical. But on the other hand, we do a very poor job of helping teams understand how to come about assessing value, what degree of rigor to put into trying to assess value, and how to do prioritization. What I find in general, that value is a subjective call. It is a challenge that the product owner has to come up with and figure out. And I think it works much better when it's looked at relatively. Usually we can get product owners to rank order in relative priority. It's much harder to come up with any quantifiable numbers for value. I think it's an area that's still in its infancy in our space, and one that has room for growth. To move on, technical excellence over technical debt. This was the one line in the manifesto that I think Bob Martin would have liked to have added, the importance of technical excellence over technical debt, or as he would say it, craftsmanship over crap. A lot of teams find that their drive from the business loves the concept of agility, because it thinks it means give me something faster and more nimble, and too often what they're driven towards is producing crap faster. And that's just building up more technical debt, and in the end, they don't have any predictability, because they've got so much debt, and they're stuck in a back end where they're bug fixing forever. Software craftsmanship, technical excellence really needs to be designed in. Quality can only be designed in, and I think the original authors of the manifesto all came from a very strong object-oriented world. They were very strong practitioners, software development practitioners that were really emphasized on technical excellence. So to them, it was sort of a ground-based. It was sort of core skills that you had to have, and they didn't really think about including it, I guess, at the time. But it is such an important thing. Teams that have so much technical debt, their velocity is just hurt drastically, and even more than their velocity is that their predictability is so low, because they just the ability to estimate bug fixing is much harder than estimation of new functionality. So what happens is the predictability goes way down when you have large number of defects, large amount of technical debt. And then we get to the last one, which we call the zombie elephant, certification. It's been pronounced dead many times, but keeps coming back. And we see so many different certifications out there. Scrum Alliance, of course, has the Certified Scrum Master. PMI has just kicked off their Agile certification. Scrum.org has a certification. And it's nothing necessarily wrong with certification. It's just that our conversations around certification, our conversations around what certification would make sense in an Agile space, have really not we've never reached a consensus in this one. So I think what's happened, people have gone off and done what makes sense. I think there's a lot of financial interest at stake. Training organizations want certification so that they have an environment in which to train to. Individuals want certification, so they believe it helps them get their skills identified and hired. And organizations want certification because they believe there's a perception that certification is meaningful and will help them with their hiring processes. And it's a great ecosystem that is a healthy ecosystem on one hand, ruled by a lot of perceptions. And I think the big debate in the Agile community has been one around certification of agility is very difficult, given that agility is a statement of values predominantly. The Agile Manifesto is a statement of values and principles. And once we start getting into certification, we start getting into more definitive practices, and potentially, at its worst, gets into a dogma issue where we say you must do things this way, because certification tries to drive towards a bit more black and white perspective rather than one that's much more open. I think people are trying, all of these organizations are trying to be more agile in their certification approaches, and I think that's good. I think that the fact that there's been some debate on this and some challenges with it, I think is a good thing, and I'm hoping that ultimately the community ends up with meaningful certifications that actually do help that whole ecosystem actually realize that we've got Agile practitioners that have certified and have been and it is useful in a hiring environment. So after spending so much time on all these things we're not doing well, we got a little down on ourselves, and we said, well, certainly in 10 years there must have been something good, because our community is growing, and it seems like it's much better than all this negative elephants, and these elephants. It's healthy for us to ask ourselves, as we honor inspecting and adapting. It's healthy to look at that. It's also healthy for us to celebrate some of our successes, and certainly the fact that the manifesto was in 10 years was a cause for celebration. But a few of the things that we picked out that we're particularly proud of from the community is the heightened focus on unit testing and automation. These are core development skills. I think we brought in test-driven development. Not everyone does test-driven development necessarily, but we've definitely focused on the importance of quality, the importance on driving testing forward as much as possible, rather than leaving it to be a full back-end activity. I think that Agility has done a good job of improving transparency, reporting and tracking. Burn down charts are excellent. Different approaches. Kanban has approaches for tracking that are excellent. So I think overall, the concept of big visible charts, making things more visible, making the anything we can do to drive towards more and more transparency and more and better predictability has, I think, a benefit to our community, to benefit to a large number of projects and to the business. A big emphasis on shipping and feedback, that we ship regularly. We have potentially shippable deliveries at the end of the iteration. We emphasize shipping. We emphasize feedback. I think these are great qualities, because what we used to see in so many traditional approaches or ad hoc approaches is that they would just keep going until they got something and didn't have intermediate drops that gave us any degree of predictability as to where they were actually going to get to. I think software development is a team sport. We've put a lot more team emphasis, a lot more emphasis on collaboration. I think we have to be careful we don't go too far there, but I think we recognize that software is a team sport. Teams need to be involved, and related to this, that a lot of teams that have moved to Agile will stay. They're there. They'll never go back. They're happy, and there's a team, one of my teams, that's very happy with their stand-up. So. We didn't always see this degree of happiness in the past with teams developing software. There's been a great global spread of agility. As of the last report I saw was 91 countries. It may have even grown from this. This was the report a year ago. So it's a global spread. It's not just works in one culture. It works across multiple cultures, and we adjust accordingly. it's now okay to be agile. We don't, our anarchists that started this are now looking to move on to something new. The mainstream has come into agile. In the early days when we were agilists, part of it was to run away, part of it, and then the other side of us, we had to stand back because we wanted to do it underground. We didn't want to have that visibility to what we were doing because we were afraid we were going to get squashed. Now it's okay. Everybody wants to be agile, so it's a good place to be. The community has grown. There's a lot of growth, new ideas coming out in the community. And I think that's all excellent. And I wanted to close here with what the other group that was doing when our small group went off to do the elephant hunting, and what the facilitators were driving for, was to come up with the four new value propositions that this group of 40 people came up with. And I actually I was a participant in the early stages of it. I wasn't detail involved in coming up with the wordsmithing of these four items, but I think they came out quite well. There were just four value principles that we came up with going forward that we thought really mattered at the state that agility is at right now. Number one was demand technical excellence. If you don't have technical excellence, you're not going to be able to have the ability and flexibility to be able to be agile. Number two was promote individual change and lead organizational change. Again, getting back to individual teams and cultural issues, key parts of being able to have agile transformations. Organize knowledge and improve education. It's been a bit ad hoc in how we pull together our knowledge within the agile community, but we're starting to see a number of groups that come together and try to pull that together. And one of the things is, since this agility is trying to be agile itself, is that we want this to be a living, breathing body of knowledge that we continue to evolve. So if it isn't, then agility will stagnate and fail. And then the last one was to maximize value creation across the entire enterprise, entire process. And this is key because we see so many times where software teams are extremely agile, but the businesses are just not. The businesses are not in a mode where they can absorb things on a cyclical basis or on an iterative basis. They're not necessarily in a mode where they can be as participative as we would like them to be, or we may be at a different frequency than they're operating. And so reality is that what we want to be looking at across the enterprise, what's it going to take in order for the enterprise to be successful, not necessarily just a couple of individual software teams. So with that, I'll post, or there's 3 different blog postings that were particularly useful about that 10-year event that I thought if anyone's interested. This presentation will be available, and I posted on my website. I haven't got it right now, but I'll have it up in an hour or so. And so one more thing here, I guess, before I move on to the website, is that for those of you that are looking at the Agile conference, it's a great experience. I've been very actively involved in it. This year I'm going to be involved in organizing the executive forum. We're still looking at a event that's probably somewhere between 1,600 and 1,800 people at the Gaylord in Dallas. So I know probably a few people on this call are in either the Dallas area or in Texas, and I'd encourage you to get this on your calendar. It's a great opportunity for meeting a vibrant community, a different style of conference, and you'll be at a lot more people-oriented, a lot of more interactive, a lot of deep learning and interactive learning. So I'll leave you with my contact information. My email is tlittle@lgc.com, and my website, toddlittleweb.com. I will post this presentation, and Hemant, you'll probably be posting this as well.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
with that, I will turn this back to Hemant.
Excellent. Thank you, Todd, for excellent discussion around the elephants in the Agile room. So with that main conversation here, we already have a few questions. So audience, this is the time for you to reflect upon the content that Todd just covered and come up with any other questions or elephants that you have on your list that you would like to bring up and discuss here. In the meantime, while you are doing that, I will take a few minutes and introduce Synerzip, and then we'll come take questions. So I'm assuming you can see the pages right now. And with that, let me just take a minute to talk about Synerzip in a nutshell. I think those of you who work with us or have attended our webinars have probably seen these couple of pages, but for others, this is new. Synerzip is a software product development partner for typically small to mid-sized technology companies. We exclusively focus on that size companies and help them expand their engineering development with helping them with the full software development lifecycle from design, development, testing, deployment, and so on, the complete cycle. For each team, we put together, for each client, we put together a dedicated team of high caliber software professionals, and in a very transparent way, we expand in-house team with a high quality team of developers from our side. And in the process, we end up reducing the risk, help our clients reduce the risk of software development, and primarily through a practice of agile development. We feel agile is an excellent way to build quality software, and it allows us to strike a appropriate balance of discipline yet responsiveness in the changing requirements kind of a situation, which is almost always the case. And in addition to reducing the risk, we are also able to reduce costs for our clients of software development by bringing to bear our dual shore team. We have a development center in India and a product management team here in the US. And with the combination, we are able to bring best of both the worlds for our clients and give them pretty much a 50% cost advantage. And lastly, we are able to provide flexibility to our clients, both in terms of being able to handle peak capacity of development capacity and testing capacity that they need, but also be able to provide them an option to convert the team that works for them at Synerzip into their own captive team whenever they feel like it, which is commonly known as a build, operate, transfer, BOT option. So that's Synerzip in a nutshell. This next page, as it refreshes on your screen, gives a glimpse of some of our clients. Almost all are small to mid-sized technology companies. So with that, if you're ready, Todd, let's take a few questions. We have a few more minutes before the scheduled time of our webinar. So,
yep.
Look, so the first question, I guess, is a question around iteration zero. Another challenge that comes up often, some the team seems to run into in Agile community, as perhaps in, as an elephant in the room, is how much of the upfront design is appropriate and should be done, and how much. So a lot of teams struggle with this topic because the purest Agile viewpoint is evolutionary design, don't know upfront design, but teams seem to have a hard time reconciling with that given the nature of it. So any thoughts on this elephant?
Sure, yeah. It's a bit of the Goldilocks situation. You want to do just the right amount. None is probably too little, and a big design up front is too much. What I usually suggest, and I think a lot of people suggest, is you do just enough that you feel a little uncomfortable. If you're at that point, you're probably about right. The important thing, I think, in that iteration zero is really driving to purpose and understanding what problems are being solved. If you don't have a good handle on where the problems are, who's having them, and where you're differentiating, why are you building the software, every person on the team really should be able to answer the elevator pitch around why they're doing what they're doing. And if they can't, I don't think you've probably done enough of the homework on trying to get the clarity around purpose and where you're going with things. So it's a challenge to know exactly what it is. I think you have to find out, and each context will be a little different as to how much to do. But the best rule of thumb I've heard is just enough where you still feel a bit uncomfortable.
All right, good. Let's take another question, which is in typical mid to large size organization, there's or even a small organization, I guess this is applying in my opinion, that a CEO or a business leader perspective of what they think when they hear the word Agile, and then they hear that their teams are going to be Agile going forward in software development, and what the engineering team or CIO or CTO or VP of engineering means when they say they're going to go Agile. So a CEO perspective is Agile is good because it's nimble, it's fast, it's quick, but misses the underlying discipline of TDD and so on that you talked about. And then, of course, the real engineering VP of Engineering viewpoint is perhaps the true Agile. So how do you reconcile this elephant?
Yeah, it's a challenge because one of the things we do believe is that teams that are effective, truly effective Agile teams will be faster, but that's not the core reason to start. Right? The core reason to start is actually to drive a more efficient and more predictable environment. The fast part will come because it's eventually there, but the business, yeah, that's right. When the business or CEO wants to see Agile, they're saying, oh boy, I'm slow now, Agile is more nimble and faster. And that's a dangerous perspective to be coming in on. It's at a start point. Right? I think that we do see that you do get there, but if we're saying we're going to take on an existing legacy code, I guess that's another elephant, is the whole legacy code. Legacy code inherently has not been developed with TDE. It doesn't have a lot of unit tests necessarily behind it. There is technical debt, and that technical debt is a huge drain on our ability to have both predictability and speed. And so we're not going to overnight take something that's a legacy code, run in an Agile manner, and find miracles. You know, it's a transitional point, and so it's really getting that mindset of understanding. So there's an educational part, there's an expectation setting part. So much of software development is around expectation setting, and we've done a historically poor job of expectation setting, because oftentimes some expectations are set on us, and we know they're not realistic, and we go off and attempt to do them anyway. So I think that's an education, and it's one of the things with transparency that we try to transparency and learning eventually get ourselves better at it.
Well, I know we are out of time already, right? But there's one important question that has just come up, and I think we will be completely inappropriate if we miss that one, which is this white elephant of performance management system, which is most organizations are still, by and large, individual-based performance management, while Agile espouses a team performance management. Any thoughts on this elephant?
Oh yeah, it's a huge one, and in fact, we've just been going through that ourselves at our organization, and it's a huge challenge. When Deming, one of his 14 points was to totally eliminate performance management, that their performance management systems they were harmful, and you know, I think it's ingrained in so many work cultures that this is the way to do things. You know, to the extent what I see when I've got to go through it myself, since I'm involved in it, is that I'm looking for so much of the things that make the overall organization healthy, such as team skills. And so while it may be an individual evaluation, I try to bring it up a level to how much are they helping others get better, how much are they helping the overall team, what are they doing in the overall context that's adding value. So yeah, I don't have an answer. I think there's a lot of people who would love to just do away with them, but then I haven't seen the elephant of that side is that we haven't seen an alternative proposed that's sufficient to solve the perceived need that's there.
Well, this is a big one. So just for the people who are interested in this, we did a webinar on this exact topic a few months ago. So you're welcome to go to our website and download that PowerPoint presentation. We had one viewpoint, but you're right, this is a big one and largely unsolved. Excellent. Hey, we have a few more questions, but as usual, we're out of time, so we'll have to just put them take those up in a subsequent webinar. Thank you so much, Todd, for being a speaker today for this excellent topic, and thank you all audience for participating in today's webinar. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Thank you very much.